We learned to read storms like a language. In winters where the town folded under white, my friend Marco and I turned shovels into paychecks. 2 kids with cheap gloves and the kind of stubborn pride that thinks freezing hands are proof of adulthood. That night in January, the weather felt like a drumbeat. Wind rolling down the avenue, snow piling so fast it glossed the tops of mailboxes, and the streetlights throwing halos into the flakes. School was already canceled, and the town's storefronts had slid their shutters like lids. Most people were inside, pressed to radiators. For a few hours, the sidewalks were ours. We knocked until knuckles cut from cold. Most doors stayed shut faces behind glass, and the muffled, uninterested voices of people who didn't want to spend their night on an unpaid errand. The universe of snow shoveling is mostly no's. Then a corner house answered, one of those small, stubborn homes with the porch light off and a wind-whipped flag hanging in tatters. The door cracked open just enough to admit a voice, not a face. "Who's there?" a man asked from the dark inside. His voice was lower than I expected, not hostile so much as a tired instrument, like someone who had been listening to the same radio for too long. I explained what we did and the price, $40 for the driveway and the walkway since it was a corner property. A beat of silence. Then, yes, come on in, 40's fine. There was a small edge of eagerness in the words, like a coin clinking inside a pocket. A weird little thing, seeing a door open but not seeing the person. When we started, Marco worked the sidewalk while I took the driveway and the walk to the stoop. The snow made a soft, repetitive sound as our shovels hit pavement. An honest rhythm that makes your breath and your teeth count the same beats. I'd glance up every so often at the house, because you do when someone sent a window into your attention. At one point, a tall figure stood at an upstairs window, the room behind him dark enough to hide details. He watched me like a pair of quiet hands watching bread rise. There's a line between being watched and being studied. I felt it at the edge of my neck, the sensation that an observation leans toward planning. I tried to dismiss the feeling as paranoia. The neighborhood had a way of sharpening nerves, but my eyes kept finding that dark silhouette. He never moved, only stood, the faint glow of a street lamp quartering his form into slices of stillness. It ought to have been enough to make me throw the last mound of snow and leave, but the cold narrows choices. Work fast, get paid, go home. We finished at the same time, and Marco came up the path toward me, breath spitting white. That's when the door opened fully and the voice from before barked a single, curt command, "Go around back." Neither of us expected an invitation into someone's yard at midnight, but the tone had something like a hand wave, an impatience that felt like money leaned to one side. We hesitated because hesitation sticks in your throat when someone's watching, then followed the shove of the wind across the lawn to the backyard gate. The gate resisted at first, snow having welded it to the frame, but it opened with an ugly scraping sound that made my teeth ache. We stepped through and pulled the gate closed behind us, and for a moment the neighborhood's muffled hum vanished. Behind the house the wind sounded different, cut flatter, like someone had put a hand on the town's chest. We stood under a small awning to let the falling snow keep its distance from our faces, The silence was so full that you could hear the whisk of flakes hitting the metal. We waited. The back door didn't open. After a minute, my fingers, numb and clumsy, started drumming against the wood. There was something ridiculous about pounding because you had no bell. I knocked with a kind of scripted impatience, like a metronome trying to be urgent. Then a window above us rotated open with a slow, deliberate mechanical whine. The voice, not angry, not warm, floated down. "Come inside." It sounded closer than it was, like someone had put his breath into a tunnel and pushed it toward us. The words made Marco and me exchange that look. You only learn by teenage consent. Do we go in or do we run? We went in. That's the stupid, human part of bravery. How it can be just a decision made by momentum and habit. The house swallowed our heat. All the lights were off. The kitchen glowed only with the orange smear of a streetlight through curtains. The air inside smelled like old cigarettes and the slow sugar of boiled cabbage homesickness and neglect. Silence pooled in rooms, heavy as a casserole dish. "Hello?" I said, because someone had to. The voice answered from somewhere behind a narrow doorway that connected the mudroom to the kitchen. "I'm counting your money on the table." It sounded absurd, like a joke repeated until it lost rhythm. The phrase tugged on the edges of my brain. Counting money on the table. Someone who liked to make things look official. I moved toward the crack between that doorway and the hallway to peer in, expecting to find an empty kitchen with a lamp and perhaps a billfold. But I couldn't look. A figure blocked the sliver of view, standing on the other side of the door and peering through our own gap at us. I could see his shoulder, the curve of his jaw caught in streetlight. I couldn't see his face, because the room behind him was darker than good sense. Something in the house shifted, a small, animal awareness. My mouth supplied an excuse. "We left something. Hold on." I told Marco to wait, and we made a show of walking back out through the same door as if we wanted to get some air. The man said nothing as we left. When we were out and the gate closed behind us, the crunch of snow under our boots felt obscene, like we had left a footprint in someone's private sleep. We sprinted the 2 blocks back to my house, adrenaline, a dull buzzing under our skin. Everything about us was wrong. Our cheeks burned, our lungs screamed, our hands shook. We tossed the shovels in the shed and tried not to talk. A few minutes later, Marco went to grab his shovel and came back inside with a face that had shrunk a degree paler than the snow. He pointed to the yard. Fresh boot prints led from our gate to the shed, 2 sets, one small, one larger, crisp and new. They stopped at the shed door. My stomach did a small dropping thing. "They went to the shed?" I asked, voice thin. Marco didn't answer. He'd already picked up the phone, hands clumsy as a teenager's when something is actually real. We told my mom and she dialed 911 within a breath. The minutes that followed were long and slow. Police eventually did come, tires hissing, lights diffused by snow. From our kitchen window, we watched an officer shove through our back gate and approach the shed. They pried the door open and pulled out a man who, when he slumped against the snow, had the same jacket as the silhouette we'd glimpsed by the upstairs window hours earlier. He confessed, later, to intending to break into the corner house while the occupants slept, an idea that made my hands go cold. He'd been drunk, he said. But sometimes the explanation is less important than what the plan itself reveals. He'd needed a way in, and he'd used the dark. I never asked what he might have done if we hadn't been running through his night. Curiosity felt like a dangerous coin. That winter, I kept checking my back gate for prints each time the snow fell. I still do, in a different way. The town's storms taught me the language of weather. But that night, I learned how easy it is for a silence to hide a shape, and how fast a doorway can turn from safe threshold into an invitation you wish you'd slam shut. The police didn't linger. They bundled him into the cruiser, snowflakes hissing on the hood, and told my mom it was handled. The phrase handled felt cheap, like taping over a broken window and calling it fixed. Marco and I stood in the kitchen, still wrapped in coats, shovels forgotten by the door. Through the glass the shed gaped open, its dark mouth framed by drifted snow. For the rest of that night, the house felt thinner. Every wall seemed a little less trustworthy, every creak a reminder that someone else had walked those same paths minutes before. I didn't sleep. Neither did Marco. We sat on the floor in my room with a deck of cards and whispered like kids in a tent, our laughter brittle and forced. Every time the wind rattled the shutters, we froze, eyes darting to the window. The sound of tires crunching on snow outside made us both stiffen until it passed. The idea that the man had hidden in the shed, our shed while we'd been inside warming our hands with cocoa, felt like a violation sharper than the cold. He could have been listening to our voices through the thin wood, waiting. Days later, when the storm had calmed, I walked back past the corner house. It looked ordinary again. Driveway still partly cleared from our work, curtains drawn, no sign of the man who had watched us from upstairs. But ordinary was a lie. Standing on that sidewalk, I could feel the echo of his stare, like a weight pressing between my shoulder blades. I imagined the kitchen door again, his face inches from the crack, waiting for me to step closer. What would have happened if we had gone into that room? What would he have done with two boys cornered by dark walls and a locked back door? Marco said we were lucky, but lucky is too neat a word. Lucky is finding a coin on the ground. What we had was escape stumbling back out into the storm before the wrong door could close behind us. The truth is, we'll never know what he meant to do, and that unknown, more than the snow, has a way of settling in, layer after layer, until it feels permanent. For weeks afterward, I avoided the shed at night. Even when my mom asked me to grab salt for the walkway, I'd hesitate at the back door, staring at the patch of yard where those boot prints had appeared like fresh scars in the snow. I'd imagine the man crouched inside, knees pulled to his chest, waiting for the house lights to go dark. The image gnawed at me. Not just that he had been there, but that we hadn't known. That our safety had already been broken before we even realized it. Marco stopped coming by after dark. He said his parents didn't like him walking our block anymore, and I didn't blame them. When we did hang out, we stuck to daytime, never mentioning that house or the way the man's voice had sounded through the crack in the kitchen door flat. Rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for that moment. Sometimes, when I thought too long about it, I wondered if the shoveling had just been an excuse, if the money on the table was bait, not payment. The police never explained what else they found, or if the family in the corner house even knew who the man was. We heard he was drunk, that he wanted to break in after people were asleep, but drunkenness doesn't account for the precision of his behavior. Watching us through the window, calling us around back, blocking the door crack with his body. Those weren't accidents, that was staging. Even now, blizzards carry a different weight for me. Snow muffles sound, makes the world look clean, but that night taught me it can also conceal. It hid footsteps until they were too close. It softened the sound of a gate opening. It kept a man crouched in a shed, close enough to hear our laughter while we thought we were safe. I still check the backyard whenever the snow piles high. Not for shovels, not for neighbors, for footprints that don't belong.